drink champagne, some die of thirst. No way of knowing which way it's going. Hope for the best, expect the worst. Hope for the best.
Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Wednesday, September 18th, 2024. I am John Podhortz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
And joining us today, there was a sketch on the old Fox comedy show In Living Color, the only real rival ever to Saturday Night Live, where there was a Jamaican family, and the Jamaican family sketch was called Hey Man. It was a fake sitcom, and everybody in the Jamaican family has 12 jobs. And then they meet some white person who they say, like, how many jobs you got? And the guy says, I'm a lawyer. I have one job. And they're like, you only got one job? Well, our guest today is somebody who has, I don't know how many jobs you have. You are the founder and editor of The Dispatch. You are a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. You are a columnist with the Los Angeles Times Syndicate. You are a talking head on CNN. You are the host of the Remnant podcast. You are the host of the Remnant sub-Remnant podcast, The Ruminant. And of course, you co-host with me the Glop podcast. I'm talking about, of course, none other than Jonah Goldberg. Hi, Jonah.
Hi, John. It's great to be here with the greatest collection of mine since Jefferson podcasted alone. So thank you very much.
It is an honor to have you in between all of your jobs, is my point.
Yeah, and, I mean, you didn't even include like the Roadkill Collector and these other things that I don't, because they're not media platforms, I don't get a lot of attention for. But
it's very sad. And yeah, so look, you know who else has lots of jobs is the Israeli military and intelligence services, because they are fighting in Gaza. They are trying to deal with the nuclear threat from Iran. They are dealing with the Houthis threatening them from Yemen, and of course dealing with Hezbollah on the northern border. And yesterday, in a gobsmacking, and I would say world historical moment, because nothing like this has ever happened before, staged the most pinpoint assault on an enemy pseudo-military in the history of mankind by simultaneously blowing up thousands of pagers in the hands of members of Hezbollah at 3:30 in the afternoon in Beirut, thus injuring, without any collateral damage or almost no collateral damage, anybody else in the side, and injuring what appears to be as many as 2,000 members, fighters, players in Hezbollah, on the verge of, one assumes, major military action by Israel against Hezbollah, thus removing, at least temporarily or whatever, hundreds, if not thousands, of fighters from whatever battlefield we think Hezbollah and Israel are going to be fighting on. It is a
we should just say allegedly, by the way, because we may never know who did it.
Yeah, we'll never know. We'll never really know who did it.
I was really stunned. I was listening to NPR this morning, walking the dogs, one of my jobs, and NPR reported as fact that Israel has privately confirmed they did it to the U.S. government.
Really?
And
that's the kind of shoe leather reporting that we need from NPR.
Exactly. Well, it was just I had not heard that kind of phrasing, and I hadn't seen that elsewhere. So who knows? Who knows? I still think it was the Belgians, but that's me.
Yeah, well, okay, so the Belgians are obviously very interested in crippling Hezbollah in advance of a confrontation between Israel and Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. I need probably hardly remind this audience, but I will, that Hezbollah is not merely just another snake cult. It is an arm of the Iranian military, much more so than Hamas and other terrorists. It is a subsidiary of the Iranian army. It is its forward base against Israel in Lebanon.
Which is why, as the Marxists would say, it is no accident that the ambassador from Iran to Lebanon had his pager blow up yesterday. Just worth pointing out.
Yeah. So we all, of course, find violence, a terribly unnecessary thing. But how awesome was this? First of all, just to go with the awesomeness, since October 8th, Hamas hits Israel in the south in October 7th. Since October 8th, Hezbollah has fired off thousands of rockets at Israel, effectively depopulating Israel's northernmost sector. 100,000 Israelis have been living in exile inside Israel, away from their homes, including my niece's husband's family, who have a B&B in the far north, all over the place. Children displaced, living in hotels, a lot of social. If you think that COVID was bad, imagine like living in exile from your home for a year in a hotel when you're a family of 5 with nothing to do, no work, and basically sort of just sort of stitched together schooling and activities and stuff like that in a country at war. Hezbollah has been at war with Israel for a year. They hit a Druze village, killing 12 children. Israeli Druze village hitting 12 children like 4 weeks ago. They're monsters. They're evil. They use missiles to target civilian populations. Every single one of those pagers that blew up in the hands of somebody who is a combatant in a war against Israel that Israel did not seek, has not been seeking to fight, does not wish to be at war with Hezbollah, would prefer to have the border be calmed and in a state of sort of Cold War. And so not to celebrate the victory of the morally just side in a conflict is itself to participate, in my view, in a kind of moral equivalence or pacifist logic that is ruinous. And so I'm going to say it again. Awesome. And all you guys out there, your memes, awesome. Sick jokes, I acknowledge, very sick jokes. All of them good. I've yet to see a bad one. So, yes.
But part of what's so awesome is if you just take this in totality with all the really complicated James Bond-like operations that Israel has carried out since being attacked. You talk about the slow, long, planned killing of Hania in Tehran, taking out Shukr, the Hezbollah commander, also in Lebanon. And now you have this unprecedented attack. The message, aside from the impact on actually taking these fighters and terrorists out of operation, but the message here is we are everywhere. You don't know how much we know about you, how much access we have to all your communications, to what is in your pocket, what is in your hand, the room you are laying your head down in at night.
That's a very important point, and it's even more important in terms of Israeli self-confidence, because, of course, the thing that was destroyed on October 7th, along with all those lives and all those injuries and the community of kibbutzim in the south that were attacked, and was Israel's sense, the national sense that its military and that the people who are sworn to protect it knew what they were doing. There was this collapse of deterrence, this failure to have kept track of and understood what it was that Hamas had been doing right on their border for 10 years, did not know the extent of the tunnel system, did not have Hamas penetrated sufficiently to know that they were planning this attack. And there's been a national crisis of self-confidence in Israel about this one thing. They knew their political system is all screwed up. Their economy is in very good shape, but their politics is dysfunctional. There's a lot of social disruption, disagreements on religion, disagreements on social order, and all of that. But one thing they all had in common is most everybody goes into the military. Most everybody comes out proud of the military, proud of the history of the last 75 years, and that was shaken to the core. And in the last 3 or 4 months, these incredibly daring, risky, and wildly successful operations has restored some of that emotional ballast to this country in the middle of this the longest war it's ever fought. And that is, you can't underestimate the positive psychological effect of that.
And the negative psychological effect on Israel's enemies.
Well, I mean, even more so. You remember there was that shot the day after Hania was killed, where the mullahs were outside. They were at either some memorial ceremony or something like that, and there was a shot of Khamenei. Now that we can read into this, like this could just be, because you could take 1,000 pictures in a minute and they can have any expression whatsoever. But he was like looking up in the air, like with an expression of fear on his face,
watching the skies.
Watching the skies, and that's obviously what you want. I mean, Jonah, did you watch the 3-Body Problem? I forget if we had this. Have you read the 3-Body Problem?
No.
Okay. Well, the conceit in the 3-Body Problem, this Netflix show and this, sort of like landmark trilogy of science fiction books, is that there is an alien civilization more advanced than ours that decides that it is going to inhibit our technological progress because it assumes that if we reach a certain level of technological progress, we will come after it and destroy it. And they don't understand that we don't even know that they're there. But they start screwing with our math. They start screwing with our elementary physics. And they have these tiny, like subatomic creatures called sophons that can watch everything, any movement, will know everything that goes on the planet Earth, and nothing can happen that they don't know or see. It's a sort of genius concept in the history of science fiction paranoia. But the Sophon effect is what Israel, I think, is almost attempting and maybe generating inside the Iranian Empire's war on Israel, which is they could be anywhere at any moment, at any time. They have our phones, they have our pagers, they bought off human spies. Who knows? We're sitting at a table in a room trying to discuss how to do a response to Israel. Who knows what they're hearing? Who knows what
that's the thing they have our pagers, is that they did have their pagers. This was not a hack. People should remember, this was not a hack. This was not really it's not like they implanted some virus or something like that. Somebody physically handled these exact pagers, all the right ones, all the exact pagers, put a bomb, essentially in them. And
2 ounces of C4. Apparently next to the battery. There's 2 ounces.
And the pagers worked as normal for the entire time between then and 3:30 p.m. yesterday Lebanon time. So they were getting pages on, that's the other thing, is that you have to do this in a way that the pagers work, because they can't be sitting for 2 weeks or whatever it is with pagers that don't work. They're going to throw them out the window. So, they were getting regular pages, and then they got the one that triggered all this. So yeah, I mean, I think there's something psychologically important with the fact that the pager you're holding in your hand may have been held, by an Israeli agent in intercepting your supply chain isn't safe. Hezbollah, you may have the Beirut airport, but your supply chain to get to the airport isn't safe.
So, I mean, a couple things on this. One, it does more than the 3-Body Problem. It reminds me of the plot on The Wire, where Freeman sells the drug dealers their own burner phones, where they already have the ability to monitor them. But there is a thing about this. Look, I'm with you, John. I need my micron telescope to find my tiny violin, to have sympathy for the people complaining about this. And yes, if there's some people saying that some girl, like a girl, was hurt, that's too bad. I mean, I don't mean that in a dismissive way. It is a shame, but it's Hezbollah's fault. And this is a remarkably precision thing. That said, it is kind of a fascinating die marker to see the psychology that kicks in from people who think this is unfair. And insofar as first of all, it does play into a anti-Semitic trope about how Jews have their fingers in everything and they're pulling strings and you never know, like behind every rock is a Jew who's like got your number and is manipulating events. I give it a pass because it's a useful thing for people to think about Israel, to be afraid of Israel. But at the same time, you can see these people who their biggest complaint is just that it's unfair that Israel's better at this stuff than its enemies. And they think that's like, they want some sort of DEI, logic to kick in, that Israel should be, what Harrison Bergeron or whatever, and not do the really clever things to protect itself. And what I like about the story is like, it doesn't occur. People are blind to this aspect of their own psychology, so they're revealing it without realizing that that's the kind of arguments that they're making. And it's worth just noting that when you start scanning Twitter or the cable news sphere.
It's like the Iron Dome in that way, right? Which is like, oh, it's not fair that they get to protect themselves from our missiles.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because, of course, there always are ancillary consequences or unintended consequences, even from wildly successful military events. So, for example, Iron Dome, this extraordinary self-defense system that has protected the center of Israel for 10, 12, 15 years, lulled Israel into a false sense of security about the danger on the ground from Hamas, and led Israelis to believe that they were impregnable, and Hamas figured out a way around Iron Dome. Similarly, Israel could, in theory, get so enamored of its own extraordinary, what would you call it, sort of its skill in doing these kinds of things, that it will not figure out how to win the thing that they need to win, which is they need to get Hezbollah either out of southern Lebanon or pacified in southern Lebanon so that life can resume in the north of Israel, with hundreds of thousands of people back in productive labor and living where they live. This is a unique set of circumstances, and the first set of darker conversations that I began participating in yesterday afternoon was, okay, what's the plan? They did this. It's amazing. What's the plan? And there are two ways of looking at this. One of which is they did this and they're about to go in. They're going to go in big, having pre-attacked. It's like, instead of, like ordinary, we would stage an attack on the command, control, and communications structures of, in Iraq or in Kuwait with Iraq in 1990. You want to take out their communications before you go in, so that they're completely disrupted, right? So this is like a radical version of that. So the question is, what's the next step? Are they in fact going to now go in, having literally crippled Hezbollah? Now's the time to go. Are they going? There were a lot of signals in the last 3 days that they're ready to go. I mean, Yoav Gallant, the defense minister of Israel, told Amos Hochstein, the American envoy to Lebanon, or told Lloyd Austin, the defense secretary, that Israel is going in. They're ready to go in the north. They are poised to go in the north. There was a huge cabinet meeting, or war cabinet meeting, on Sunday night in Israel, and a lot of different stories were coming out of it, including that Bibi Netanyahu was on the verge of firing Gallant and replacing him with another Israeli politician named Gideon Star. That could have been a feint. That could have been a dodge, a way of distracting Hezbollah, or trying to lead the enemy to think that they're torn and in disarray, when they're in fact implacable and ready to go in. But if they don't go in, if they're not on the way in, and this is just a stunt, then that's going to make a lot of people I know nervous that they're sort of game playing or something like that.
Well, but wasn't there reporting that they did this on a hurried schedule precisely because they thought that Hezbollah might have Hezbollah operatives might have discovered that the pages were tampered with? I mean, again, there's so many different conflicting reports. I hadn't heard that it was confirmed that it was C4 until you mentioned it earlier. So
well, that's in the New York Times this morning. Maybe it's not. I mean, it's a little bit of explosive, according to the lead New York story in the New York Times. A little bit of explosive put next to the lithium ion battery. Now, how they programmed each of these pagers to respond specifically to, it's like picking up the phone and someone saying the woods are lovely, dark and deep, and then you turn it into a Russian sleeper agent. That's now our fifth pop culture reference of the podcast. That was to the movie Telephone from
the life we've chosen.
1979. And we're doing it's commentary and glop merged here. As long as we don't talk about Star Trek and The Odd Couple, we'll be okay. But
the Marvel most ambitious crossover.
There we go. Well, you know what? I'm out of that. That's Jonah's territory. I don't. That's stuff that I don't really know about.
This could be also just one in a series of waves of attacks on Hezbollah in various ways to degrade their ability to fight.
Right.
It was a few weeks ago that Israel took out all sorts of rocket launching systems and air defense systems, right? So preemptively struck their rocket launchers.
Yeah.
So they could just sort of keep chipping away, making hell for Hezbollah to be able to carry out a war.
Also, there were some people yesterday saying that one of the advantages of this attack is that they're doing saturation surveillance of all the ERs, all the radio calls, all the phone chatter. So it may be that while it would make sense to do this in conjunction with some larger attack, just the data trove that you're getting from monitoring the response to this is worth waiting a day or two. I mean, I don't know, but that sounds plausible.
Well, there's that, and then there's also the fact that we don't know, but we can assume that they were collecting data on Hezbollah's movements around Lebanon from the pagers before they detonated them.
Right.
So that if you have thousands you basically have like a dot map of every, it's like Waze or something. Like you have every car in Waze, and you're
more of a splatter point map now, John.
Thank you, splatter point.
Also Israeli developed, right? Waze is another.
Waze, that's right. Waze, yes, another Israeli innovation. That I'm just saying that like they now know so much, and they're learning yet more. I'm just saying that there is this question of what comes next. I gather, I'm not a military strategist. Everybody that I know who knows this thinks Israel has got to go in on the ground in Lebanon to do what they have to do to essentially. There's 18 miles of Hezbollah controlled territory south of the Litani River, which is where all the armaments that are directly aimed at Israel, including high-level missile weaponry that could hit Tel Aviv and stuff like that. And they're going to have to be taken out. Some of it's going to have to be taken out by hand. And as we haven't even really talked about that much in Gaza, and that territory reoccupied. I mean, this is the horrible part about this is it's 25 years since Israel unilaterally pulled out of Lebanon south of the Litani River under Prime Minister Ehud Barak. There is a UN resolution obliging Lebanon to keep that area free of the military. So another bang up UN job.
Not just obliging Lebanon, obliging the UN itself. UNIFIL, the right. Interim force in Lebanon themselves, yes. The Blue Helmets are supposed to be doing it.
That's right. So Israel pulled out of Gaza in 2005, and in 2023, you could say, okay, they bought 18 years of peace, but in 2023, this unprecedented attack happened. Once Israel left the territory to the devices of Hamas when Hamas took over. Similarly with Lebanon, Israel's already fought one war in Lebanon after the unilateral pullout. That was in 2006. They went in after the kidnapping of 3 Israeli soldiers and, were on the ground in Lebanon for 34 days. Some of this, while Kamala Harris walks around and says, we have to get a deal, and there'll be a 2-state solution, and there has to be ceasefires. Like, okay, you want a ceasefire. How are you going to feel about occupation? You really don't like occupations, right? You say that the West Bank is occupied and all of that. Israel is going to militarily occupy parts of Gaza and probably parts of Lebanon now because it literally has no choice. The only way it can reestablish a deterrent is to make it impossible for fighters to return. And the new head of Hamas, Khaled Mashal, gave a speech yesterday, the day before yesterday, in which he said, we're going to be back. We're going to be there. We're there. We're not leaving. We're never going to leave. We're going to stay, or they're going to push us out. We're going to come back. So
he's never going to leave Doha. He's never going to leave his 5-star suite in Doha.
Well, would you? But I mean,
yeah,
you can say, okay, it's just braggadocio, but take him at his word. I mean, what, are we not going to take him at his word that Hamas is going to make every effort it can to reconstitute itself in Gaza? Israel can't allow that to happen.
Presumably, they'll continue finding tunnels in South Lebanon, which they have in the past, and not quite as sophisticated as what Hamas has done in Gaza, because they were sort of left alone, in the enclave for all that time. But they do have some tunnels, and they do have a lot of stuff underground. We're looking at the above ground devastation in Gaza, which is what the scenes are that are making people, call it a genocide and this and that. In order to get to what's below ground in Lebanon, you have to do something similar to some of those places. Before 2006, the Second Lebanon War, if you went to the northern border in Israel, you would see Hezbollah guys wandering around. You could wave to them. It was like the Israelis used to wave to the Jordanian snipers in the towers. And everything sort of went underground after that, and everything changed. And so in terms of an occupation and a battle in South Lebanon, it isn't just from the air or flyover attacks and stuff. They're going to need some of the things some of the heavy bombs that they've been using in Gaza, or they won't get to where some of the launchers are, where some of the stocks are, where some of the tunnels are, stuff like that. And I think that is something that they have to, although nothing in the world really looks like Gaza's tunnel system, as we found out, the process to take out tunnels is basically the same in Lebanon as in Gaza, and they're going to have to wage similar attacks.
One difference: there are no hostages in the tunnels in Lebanon,
right?
So therefore, they can be blown up with impunity. And Israel has been going through those tunnels in Gaza with unbelievable care, not only because of booby trapping and things like that, but because they don't know if they're going to turn a corner and find an Israeli or an American, tied up in a corner. Jonah, Kamala Harris went before, was interviewed. I know. I don't. Please take a nitro, because I know your heart's about to come out of your chest from shock. But she was actually interviewed yesterday by 3 journalists from the National Association of Black Journalists, and two things stood out to me from that interview. One is they said, "We know that you're very concerned about the humanitarian toll in Gaza, and what are you going to do to continue? If you say Israel needs defense, but what are you going to do to continue to do all this?" And she said, "Well, we need that deal now. We need a deal now. We need a ceasefire now. That deal has to come now, and we need a deal now." Okay. She's now been saying this for, how long has it been 2 months that she's been the candidate? I don't even know how long.
I think, yeah.
Okay. She's literally said nothing else. Like, she has said nothing else. I mean, she said there's too much killing. She said there's too much. She said we need a deal now. We need a ceasefire now. These journalists, fair is fair, asked her what her specific policies would be to ensure Israel's security and and do something to protect the safety and lives of the Palestinians. And she said, we need to do a deal now. That's one thing, because I'm like, I don't know. Can you just say the same thing over and over again that doesn't mean anything? First of all, there isn't going to be a deal now. Though, by the way, Antony Blinken, I know, please, once again, take a pill because I'm worried about your health, is going back to the region. He's
Excellent.
back. He is approaching Warren Christopher's 18 visits to the anteroom of Assad's office to negotiate over hostages and things in Syria back in the 1990s. I think this is Blinken's 312th visit or something to wherever the hell it is that he's going, along with Envoy Amos Hochstein and Schmonvoy so-and-so and Bill Burns and Montgomery Burns and I don't know who else. And there is no deal because it's not clear that Hamas as a functioning entity still exists in the way that it did before, which may be one of the reasons that Israel is turning its attention to the north, that they actually really mean it when they say that Hamas is finished as a fighting force. The problem is finding the hostages and getting the hostages out. But that, like, do we know that Hamas's leadership in Doha, led by Khaled, 5-star concierge level Mashal, can even reach Yahya Sinwar in the tunnels? We literally have no idea whether they have any command, control, and communications at all left.
Well, the reports are saying that they have to go even more primitive than pagers, right? If you look back a few weeks ago, there were these stories about, here's how Hezbollah is going to avoid Israeli surveillance. Pagers. It's brilliant. And then yesterday they all blew up. But so Sinwar isn't even using pagers. It's like, I don't know, maybe what's the ultimate unhackable?
He's using a runner.
Machine?
He's using a runner.
Right. He's using
it's like the runner from Marathon.
Right.
It's 26 miles. They're running from Gaza to Doha and then collapsing with the message.
And there are ways to make runners explode. I'm just going to put it out there.
But they're talking about a code. He's got some sort of code system. So yeah, it's a human chain thing that's the only thing that's not hackable. So I don't know how long maybe he's reachable. But how long does it take to reach him to go through that system, right? If Mashal wants to know, hey, we got an offer on the latest, what are your thoughts on this deal, and sends the paper, it's like, well, somebody's got to walk from Doha to, there's got to be a human chain for that.
It's like
maybe they don't hear from him. Maybe he doesn't see that paper for 2 weeks.
Yeah. But it's like the negotiations in the 1850s between Admiral Perry and Japan on the opening of Japan, because Perry had to send letters back to Washington to get guidance. It took 2 years for that negotiation because, it would take 2 months for the letter to get back to the president and the Secretary of State to send back an offer for him to offer it. Then the Japanese say, and then he had to send another letter back. That's like 19th century diplomacy, right? I mean, if you're going all the way halfway across the world, I mean, so there isn't that much time.
And
but
I think as Jonah was alluding to, if Israel can intercept a shipment of pagers, they can also intercept the courier, right? So that's the other.
Well, or they could replace the courier. They could
By the way,
okay. Mention number 6, face off. They could put the face. They could put the courier, make the mask, put the face on, and it's actually Gabriel alone from the Daniel Silva novels delivering the message to Khalid Mashal.
But
listen, the message is you don't mess with the Zohan.
Yeah.
This brings up one more aspect though of the criticism of the operation yesterday on the pagers. One line I heard, and I think it may be the line that sticks, is, well, Israel hasn't thought through the implications of this, what this means for the supply chain and how we're all at risk now. This has opened up a new phase of warfare where you can sort of blow up anyone anytime. As if Israel invented sabotage,
right.
like you couldn't what did the Hamas attack? What were the implications on October 7th on the future of music raves?
Festivals,
I mean, give me a break.
Also, I find the careful what you wish for argument, which, look, we're all conservatives. We should all appreciate that, there are unintended consequences and crooked timber of humanity and all that kind of stuff. But you never get the careful what you wish for or beware of blowback or unintended consequences stuff about Hamas. Right. You never get it about our enemies. It's always this way to ping the conscience of Western, fairly decent societies not to do something. It is never like, no one ever says, Vladimir Putin should be careful what he wishes for because it may not be a 3-day operation. Or Hamas might want to watch out because this could so piss off Israel that they decide to finally eradicate Hamas for all time. It's always a way to sort of, no one ever says to the bad guys, hey, violence never solved anything, right? It's like Gandhi only said that to the British, and his advice to the Jews was commit mass suicide.
Yeah.
But he never said to Hitler, hey, man, violence never solved anything, right? And so it's like there's a kernel of wisdom to that kind of advice, but if you only apply it to the people on one side of the fight, your double standard is really revealing your single standard, and it's you just don't want Israel to win.
And it's also a bizarre talking point. I mean, look, we're now 21 years after 9/11. And it was just like war is always the result, bad war is always the result of miscalculation. Like nobody actually wants, I mean, okay, the Greeks, I'm actually listening to the Iliad on Audible. And so, of course, the Greeks wanted war. They liked war. It's how they made money and it's how they got honor and all of that. But like, generally speaking, in the modern age, there wars are the nature of war is that there's a fundamental miscalculation about who's attacked and who's attacking, and that the attacker never really anticipated the blowback response. And of course, so I say 23 years after 9/11 because 9/11 was based on a theory that Osama bin Laden had, right, that he could take the West down because we had lost our will to fight. And we're 23 years after 9/11. Osama bin Laden is dead. Al-Qaeda no longer exists. Saddam Hussein is not the ruler of Iraq. And it's like they awakened the sleeping giant, we rouse whatever. People think that this was a terrible mistake and everything was stupid and Iraq was stupid and all that. But the simple fact of the matter is, it's like FAFO. Like
don't pull on Superman's cape.
Yeah. I mean, this is a very serious thing. And when you say things like, oh, Israel has thought of everything in this one sense, which is when they didn't think of it, they got October 7th. The thing that they didn't think they got October 7th from, that's how Cheney came up with the 1% theory of how you had to conduct the fight after 9/11, which is imagine 9/11 with a nuclear weapon. That's what we cannot ever allow to happen. Right, that there's a 1% chance. So with the phones and the pager, that stuff, if it can be done, it will be done. That's, I think, Abe, what you're saying. I mean, if you can weaponize an iPhone, Kim Jong-il could figure out how to weaponize the iPhone. Kim Jong-un could. I mean, it's not.
He's not going to be able to inject some explosive into American. First of all, most Americans aren't going to have pagers.
Right.
I know Dennis Duffy from 30 Rock says technology is cyclical, but we're not going back to pages.
But what I mean is, if it is achievable, if it is doable, as Thomas Kuhn teaches us, it will be done. So the idea is do it first.
Yeah, and they're aiming at the same sort of targets, right? Like the Houthis bombing the Red Sea is also messing with the supply chain, right? I mean, like they don't have the same ability, so they do it in this more primitive way. But the war over controlling the things that pass through the supply chain is ongoing. It's not like nobody's ever thought of, interrupting the supply chain. The other thing, by the way, though, the other criticism that comes around a lot, which is what I think we can refer to as the Fauda problem, which is where people just sort of assume that Israel can always make somebody's pocket blow up instead of dropping a bomb. And it makes me think of when I was a cub reporter and covering, the police beat. The number one complaint constantly was what they called the CSI effect, which is like there was a crime and people were like, well, okay, go get the DNA from the scene, put it under a microscope. I watch this show every Monday at 9 p.m., whatever it is on CBS. And it was expected. And they expected them to catch people the way they saw on TV. people do expect that Israel can do things the way they see them on TV, which this very much was, and it's not, and those those complaints are already coming out. I saw a number of them yesterday. The liberal writer John Gans wrote, Israel having the ability to target militant networks in this sophisticated way, as well as its targeting of high-level Hamas figures abroad, makes its operation in Gaza look even more deliberately genocidal. So that's the Fauda problem, which is that when Israel does something impressive, the assumption is, oh well, if there's no such thing as collateral damage, then
right? So if it has to conduct a conventional exercise like the war in Gaza, which had to be done hand to hand, building to building, because the battlefield had been built underground, then it's a conventional war, and conventional wars are distressingly similar in appearance, as we know from the images of Ukraine under attack, or whatever those Russian towns look like under attack, or whatever, or Srebrenica, or what was going on in Bosnia in the 90s, or Afghanistan,
But I mean, look,
or Baghdad. That's what it looks like when you have to conduct a conventional war in an urban setting. It's horrifying, and it's terrible, and it's monstrous, and it's not genocide to blow up buildings.
But it's also there's an easy way to solve this problem, which is if they want Israel to conduct that kind of war against Hamas, Hamas needs to agree to receive pagers from Israel and use them in a judicious manner. To get back to your original question, or what I thought was going to be your original question about can Kamala Harris keep saying this?
Yeah.
The answer is yes. I mean, she shouldn't. She should have a better answer. I think we can all agree on that. But she's getting away with it. It's not like, outside of this podcast, it's not like there is a huge amount of chatter. Can you believe Kamala Harris used the same answer on Israel again? And I think I think her answers in general, like that NABJ conversation, was so much better than her Pennsylvania Channel 6 thing from a week ago. Where she basically sounded like she just ransacked some greeting card and scented candle shop for slogans, and spewed them out. But she's very disciplined. And since we're doing the pop culture thing, it's a little bit like George H.W. Bush in 1988. Remember when he had the Saturday Night Live debate thing where Dana Carvey was like, "Stay the course, wouldn't be prudent."
1,000 points of light.
1,000 points of light. And then the moderators are like, "Sir, you have another 90 seconds.
Yeah.
And he just keeps repeating it, right?
Yeah.
She's being disciplined in part because I think she's not very good, which is a very generous way of describing how terrible she is at extemporaneous speaking. And as long as Trump is talking about eating dogs and cats and all that kind of stuff, and I think she can get away with a lot of simple answers to things.
Let's talk about her getting away with it, because you're right. You're obviously right, because we now have more than a week's worth of polling, and she not only won the debate, but at least nationally, she has secured what was referred to in the months before Biden dropped out on Trump's behalf as a small but persistent lead. She is now in most averages, except for the mysterious Real Clear Politics average, 3 points ahead nationally. I think Real Clear Politics has a somewhat smaller number from some.
I think they include
modality.
Rasmussen and a couple of those things.
Well,
in there,
they all include Rasmussen, but they weight things differently. Now, so she is around 3 points ahead nationally. She wasn't before. She now has a positive favorability rating, which she has never had.
Mm-hmm.
And the state polling, which remains tight as a tick, is nonetheless has improved for her. And she has had one of the few debate bounces that seems to be sticking that we've ever seen. So, yeah, of course. I mean, if you were her, if you were their team, why would you change strategies. Your strategy is working.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there was about 2 weeks ago where it looked like when things were regressing back to the mean, that it looked like Harris's strategy of sitting on the ball and not giving interviews had hit the point of diminishing returns. And I think she could hit that point again. I think the debate, people were saying, I need more information. I need to know more about her. The debate filled a lot of those gaps for a little while. But I do think that at some point, she's going to need to do something else to reassure people. But her trend lines are good and Trump's are bad, was it Enton thinks she has a 50-50 chance to win the Electoral College, but a 70% chance to win the popular vote. And I think it's probably going to get a little better. The polling out of Pennsylvania is pretty solid. I mean, we're just doing rank punditry here now, right?
Yeah,
So
totally rank.
And I'm one of these guys who thinks that the debate about the cats and dogs and the Haitians and blaming the left for the assassination stuff, I don't think that wins net new voters for Trump. I think that intensifies support among the supporters he already has, and that has been his strategy, right? He's been the guy for almost a decade now who's like the salesman who says, sure, we lose money on every sale, but we'll make up for it in volume, right? And he's intensifying the support of his hardcore people, and I think he's losing those people who just don't like the drama.
So, as a dog owner, Jonah, as one of America's most famous, at least social media's most famous dog owners, you of course would be heartsick to learn and horrified beyond measure, more than many people, by the idea that dogs were being taken and eaten by illegal immigrants, or indeed by anybody.
Yeah, I don't care about the immigration status, to be honest.
Yes,
when you come to stealing and eating dogs.
Yes. Yeah, okay. All right. So I believe, and I floated this argument last week, that maybe there was some evil brilliance in doing the dogs thing because it keeps the conversation going, and that the more conversation there is about illegal immigration, the better it is for Trump. And I am now coming around to the view that this is where, once again, in the world where people think that Donald Trump plays 4D chess, when in fact he plays 52 pickup.
Mm-hmm.
There's no evidence that Trump plays 4D chess. In fact, his great strength is animal cunning, which is the opposite of 4D chess, which is like Vulcan self-control. And 52 pickup is the game where you throw cards up in the air and you try to collect them as fast as possible. And his animal cunning is he has an instinct for where people's weak points are and how to pull himself back from the worst brink. But he hasn't actually been in a competitive situation since 2020 in the same way, right? I mean, the thing is, DeSantis, Haley, all those, they didn't contest with him during the Republican primary season.
Right.
It was the strangest primary fight ever, since DeSantis never said, you cannot allow this guy to be president. He's crazy. He claimed the election was stolen. His policies are bad. He will lead us down pick me because don't just pick me because I'm better. He's worse. No one ever did that. And
certainly
so
not
now,
to his face, right? I mean,
right. And so now he's in a race with somebody who's saying, he's really bad. And the person that he's running against isn't senile. So his animal cunning may be deserting him now, because he hasn't actually, or he doesn't have muscle memory. I mean, not that cunning needs muscle memory. So my imagery here is awful. But he may just not actually know how to be in a fight with somebody who is up against him for the same thing. And remember, as a real estate person in New York, and I got to point this out, New York's a zero-sum game in real estate terms. Manhattan's an island. There's nowhere else to develop. Development sites pop up. There aren't that many of them. 15 people go for one, right? There's a spot. You could put up a 60-story building, and there's one spot. and people can buy it, whatever. And Trump lost almost all of those efforts in the zero-sum game of New York real estate. He built 3 major buildings in New York City in 40 years. I have a friend who's a major developer, 15, same time. You never heard of him. Built 15 buildings, Trump built 3. What does that tell me? It tells me that when it comes down to head-to-head contests, he won one. And in politics, lost one, and then, he was able in this weird internal battle inside the Republican Party to win and dominate, but that's not the contest.
Well,
and,
just to channel Matt, because he's not here, and not that I even side with him on this. I think in all its implications, he'd say, well, the fact remains Donald Trump is still in a better position than he's ever been heading into an election, despite even the post-debate bounce for Kamala. So animal cunning or not, maybe he's whatever he's doing, it's not putting him in jeopardy in the way that he has been in past elections.
But that's what the polling over the last week suggests might be changing. If she gains on him, then the idea that he's, more popular than ever, that may or may not be true, but she's getting more popular than he is. And in the end, it's 1 against 1. So it's better for him to hit that 48% ceiling, like smash right up against it, smash his head against it and get every one of those 48% votes. And then she gets 52% and she gets him in the right place. And by the way, if she gets 52% of the vote, she'll win the Electoral College. Like the Electoral College victory of Trump depends. I know there's this idea that this is all nonsense because it's just running up the vote in California, the Electoral College. But not in an electorate of 150 million people. If you win by 4 points, he's going to win the Electoral College. So people need to be like ready and steady for that, because that is a national effect. That's not just a local effect. Hillary beat him by 2.
And that poll you sent around the other day, right? The Iowa +4 had gone from +17 to +4. That's what a national move looks like.
Yeah, it's a national shift. If you have a state that Trump's going to win, but it tightens. Texas is tightened. Like all these places that Trump is going to win have nonetheless tightened. That's where you see, and that's the great poll. That's the best poll in America. The Seltzer Iowa poll just showed movement toward Kamala. It's not. So that's the Matt. That's in absentia. Matt is wrong.
Yeah. So also, and
he doesn't get to defend himself. So what? How about that?
Since we have more New Yorkers on this podcast than I normally have the luxury of having, yesterday on Truth Social, Trump, on his way to the Nassau Coliseum rally,
which is tonight,
was it tonight? I thought it was last night. He promised to repeal the SALT tax provision that he signed and bragged about signing into law. Now, I get it. Look, the making overtime tax-free, making no tips on tax. I get the populist pandering, nothing matters, just, chicken in every pot. If he was what was it Mencken said about Truman, that if there was a sizable constituency of cannibals in America, he would promise a fatted Christian missionary for every one of them. I get that impulse. What does he think he's doing to win in why do this for New York, right? Why throw something that you bragged a lot about, that Republicans still talk about doing to screw the blue states? Why pander to that constituency in New York if you know you're not going to win New York?
I guess we should explain what this is. This is the restoration of the state and local tax deduction, which was
state and local tax stands for SALT, right? That's what.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Right. So this is a weirdly regressive or progressive tax, because the higher tax state you're in, the better the SALT state and local tax deduction is, obviously. And so Republicans, who mostly represent states with lower tax bases, the people who have less money. The 2017 tax bill repealed much of the state and local tax deduction, or capped it. I can't remember what the specifics are, but in a way
10,000,
a way by injurious to me personally, by the way, as
Sure.
a resident of New York City, but actually good policy, because it's a ridiculous thing where you're essentially, the federal government is subsidizing high tax states by not making their high taxes a political issue inside the states, by letting people get a break for it. Also a good populist issue, as you mentioned, if you use it right.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the 4 or 5 Republican congressmen who won in 2022, this is my guess, there was this unexpected, everywhere else in America, Republicans did way worse than expected in 2022, except in New York State, where 5 Republicans won. Effectively, the reason the Republicans control the House is that 5 Republicans took seats away from Democrats, and it is the number one Republican issue. It's the number one Democratic issue in the state, aside from abortion, is the restoration of the SALT deduction. And so if Trump says I'm for that, I guess that means that the Republican candidates can now say they're for it too, without looking like they're crosswise of Trump. That's the only thing that I can think of. Either that, or he's just now, anyone says, oh, here's a tax cut, and he's going to endorse a tax cut. Like like tips, overtime, I don't know, whatever. It's all this weird, it's hilarious, because it is such a betrayal of Republican orthodoxy on how to handle tax cuts, to do the pinpointing and picking out constituencies to cut taxes of. The entire modern Republican Party from Reagan onward has been about broad-based tax cutting to make it fair and have positive macroeconomic consequences for the entire country, and not just use it to pander to a constituency. But that's Trump.
It might also just be Trump's way of, when a band is on tour, saying, how's it going, Long Island? Just he goes somewhere and says, what do the people here want? This salt? Okay, I'm going to give you this, right? And then he'll go to another state where that would be in total contradiction, but that doesn't bother him.
By the way, it's no joke here, which we certainly have no time to get to this, but we are conducting this election. The subject of domestic politics in 2025, at least the second half of 2025, is going to be, what is the American tax system going to be after December 31st, 2025? The entire tax system was rewritten in 2017, sunsets December 31st, 2025. It's all going to have to be rewritten. The president, Harris or Trump, is going to be at the forefront. I mean, they're not going. The House Ways and Means Committee is obviously going to draft the first version of it, but or the Senate, whatever, but together. But this is no joke. We don't know what tax rates are going to be. We don't know what the top tax rate. We don't know what the capital gains tax rate is going to be. We don't know what deductions. We don't know what expensing is going to be, or depreciation is going to be. This is very, very serious. If there were a time for a wonky debate about what the tax code should look like, it is now, because that's who's going to be the president. And Harris is going to say, I'm middle class, and I'm from the middle class, and I love our small businesses.
And
I'm
creating an opportunity economy.
Opportunity economy for those small businesses, like my second mother had. Second mother. Small business, ceasefire now.
My father was a small business. His father was a small business.
Anyway, I don't know. It's for a moment at which really not being substantive is kind of like an actual problem in determining who should or should not be the next president. We do have 2 uniquely horrible candidates at putting flesh on the bones of these.
But this speaks to why Kamala can get away with not being substantive right now, because Trump's doing his shtick. He's doing his "Hello, Long Island," as Seth says in his place by place slogan.
Well, look, we could say I told you so until the cows come home, but what's the point? You
I tell you,
know,
I've been sitting here just biding my time, honored to be here, waiting for Abe to say, but it's worse than that. And it's like waiting for Godot. It's really, I feel betrayed.
oh no, all right, well, hold on.
That's it. That's the
wait a
encore.
minute, wait a minute.
No, it
If-
has
if
to
the
come
salt ta-
authentically.
if the salt taxes,
the morning
you
is
know,
young.
Okay, Abe, I'll give you one. I'll give you one.
Go ahead.
Slow Horses episode 1, season 1. It was great. Slow Horses season 1 was great, right?
Well,
Well,
You can't.
it's
force
worse than that.
it's worse. I'm there because
Yes.
Abe told me he didn't like the end of Slow Horses season 1 because it's
No.
turns out
Yeah,
the
well-
bad guys are anti-Muslim terrorists.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
okay.
my problem. I mean, Seth brought it up earlier. I liked a lot of Don't Mess with the Zohan, but they had to find peace by making white right-wing real estate developers the real villains.
Yeah, and Dave
Really?
Matthews.
Yeah. Well, and or like
And
TCU,
Ferris or
or,
Dave
you know.
Matthews. Yeah, that's right.
No, so
Yeah.
I texted John when there's like a kidnapping and a potential beheading, the whole MO of jihadist terrorism. But it turns out that
Right.
the
It's
suspect is a right wing, a right winger.
Well,
And I said to John, "Is this what the show is
Are
going
you
to
going
be?"
to make me watch more?
Yeah,
of it?
yeah.
And I
Because
said
I can't
they
keep
don't
watching
do
it if
more of
that's what it is, but it's not.
Okay.
So when I was on book tour for my first book, liberal fascism, I used to talk about this a lot. The Clear and Present Danger Tom Clancy movie, the first Ben Affleck one, right? So in the book, as wacky as this may sound, a bunch of Muslim terrorists want to get a nuclear weapon and blow up an American city. And in the movie, Hollywood's like, we can't do that. That's crazy talk, right? And so they make the real villains a cabal of neo-Nazi Dick Cheney-like businessmen in Europe who have swastikas on the inside of their watches, and they're going to bring about the Fourth Reich by instigating a war between the Muslims and the Christian West. And like
Torn from the headlines.
exactly, and Hollywood's like, yes, that's what we need. Which is basically it's the Don't Mess with the Zohan move, just done
Yeah.
earnestly. So
Yeah. Oh,
good times
sad.
on this episode of Glop.
No, it's great. We'll do Glop and we'll just talk about Israeli foreign policy with Rob. We got to do one of those soon. I don't ever. Anybody ever recommends? I don't ever recommends.
I can recommend.
The Iliad. I recommend the Iliad. It's really good. Go ahead.
So I can recommend. There's a book called a novel called Your Presence is Mandatory, and the author is Sasha Vasylyuk, and it is basically a multi-generational portrait of a family in Russia from World War II on through to the present day, and the main character in it, he's Jewish, but the Judaism is not very important to the plot, except for there are occasional moments where he knows he can't get caught, like when he's in a German work camp or something. He can't do the medical check, so he has to have his buddy, go twice and pretend to be him or something like that. But for the most part, it's really just this Ukrainian soldier who gets caught and has to pretend for the rest of his life that he didn't get caught, because Stalin came out with his decree about any Russian soldiers who allow themselves to be taken into enemy hands. These are traitors and whatever. And so he has to construct a story of what happened that is at odds with what happened, or he won't get a military pension for his family. They won't get jobs. The KGB will take care of them, et cetera, et cetera. And so it is this. So it's a very interesting. It's called Your Presence is Mandatory, Sasha Vasylyuk, and it paints very interesting scenes in the prison camps, and what it was like when you would, a Ukrainian soldier or a Russian soldier would be, caught by the German police and then auctioned, and made somebody's maid or housekeeper or whatever. So there's a lot of scenes from sort of inside enemy territory, as you might call it, that we don't often get. It's very good, and it's just about history catching up to you.
Right.
Eventually.
Okay, so that is Your Presence is Mandatory. I'm looking it up. So the Vasilyuk is Vasilyuk. Sasha Vasilyuk, emigrated from Ukraine to the United States. At the age of 13, and has been writing fiction ever since. So that's a great recommendation. Jonah Goldberg, such a pleasure.
Great to be
to
here.
have you on our podcast. And now
I love all your work.
Please
Love
go
being
back to your podcast, and when you have someone from my podcast on your podcast, make fun of how I talk too much on this podcast. And I'm not going to talk about how you talk too much on your podcast, because I'm too big. I'm too grand. I'm too generous a person.
I mean, there's a reason why people call you John. Take the high road, Podhoretz.
It's true. It's true. It's very much my. It's in there.
Yeah.
Actually, my middle name is Mordecai, but that means take the high road. I don't know if you know that in Hebrew.
Gonna need a fact check on that, Seth.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So anyway,
Great to be
fact
here.
checkers. No fact checkers at this debate. There will be no fact checking anymore. Anyway, so thanks again, Jonah, and for Seth and Abram, John Podhoretz, keep the candle burning.